Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. My name is Amy Brand. I am with Jacobs and I'm the facilitator. This is the Restoration Advisory Board for the Stewart Air National Guard Base. So thanks for everybody for making it into this new platform. I appreciate your being here, and we'll go ahead and get started. I want to remind you that this meeting is being recorded. We do post these recordings on YouTube after the meeting, so just so you're aware. Next slide, please. This is me. Before we get into the heart of the agenda, I want to go through some of the virtual meeting logistics for this platform for WebEx, given that this is our first time using the platform. So for those of you on your computer, we're asking people, and this is some of these things are the way we've done it before. If you, we're asking people to keep their video off except for presenters. You should all be able to see, however, who is on the call by opening the participants list. That's down at the bottom, either circled in pink down here. It's either got the word participant written out or just has the little person like that. If you click on that, you should be able to see the participants on the call. To ask questions in the RAB meeting, the way we run this RAB meeting is that RAB members at the end of each presentation can raise their hand to be called on to speak. The way you raise your hand is by running your mouse over your name, and then a little hand will appear, and that's shown there in yellow. And you can click on that, and I will see who has their hands raised. And when I call your name, you can unmute yourself. So that's for RAB members. For people participating from the public who have questions, you can type a question into the question and answer panel. To get to that, in the lower right corner, there are 3 little dots, or there may be a little square with a question mark in the corner. If you click on that, it'll open the question and answer panel, and please direct your question to all co-hosts. That way the team will be able to see your question. We will address those. You can type in your question at any point during the meeting, but we will address them at the end. This is for public participants. Next slide, please. So a couple other things about WebEx is you can zoom in on the slides if you want to see them better. This is particularly useful for maps. So just above where you can see the slides, there's a plus and minus and a percentage, so you can zoom in on that. And then also the reason we switched over to using WebEx tonight is it does offer closed captioning in both English and as well as a few other languages, including Spanish. It is computer-based live transcription, which means it is probably not very good, and I apologize for that. We have tested it. I know there are some problems with it, and if anyone is aware of a virtual meeting platform that does a better job at it, we are very interested in hearing that. But we wanted to take this step forward based on some feedback we had gotten from RAB members earlier this summer. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are on the phone, hopefully you have received a copy of the slides. If you can't see them on your computer, I sent them by email to RAB members, and today I sent them to the whole our whole stakeholder list. So and then for you, there's no way to submit questions in writing. So if you are a RAB member, you can dial *3 to raise your hand when RAB member question and answer period is at the end of each presentation. Dial *3 to raise your hand. I will see that your hand's unraised and unmute you. And you'll receive a prompt to dial *6 to unmute yourself. If you're from the public, like I said, there's no good way to submit questions in writing if you're just on your phone. So I ask you to please just wait to the end of the presentation when we take questions and answers from the public, and then go ahead and press *3 to raise your hand. Okay, so next slide, please. So I just want to run through who's here. Many folks who are here from our Air National Guard team. From the National Guard Bureau is Lieutenant Colonel Richard DeFeo and Keith Freihofer and Bill Meyer, Restoration Program Manager. Representing Stewart Air National Guard Base is Colonel Cook, who's the commander, and he is the co-chair of this team. Mike Ottinger is the environmental manager. And then, as highlighted here, Technical Sergeant Dan Hodder is public affairs. Sarah Pastorello is still with the National Guard, but is no longer with Public Affairs. So Technical Sergeant Dan Hodder will be your new contact there. Likewise, from the Army Corps of Engineers, we have a new contact, Tom Heinz for the New York district, and then also Osborne Jackson representing the Baltimore district. Representing the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is Justin Starr, and the Department of Health is Wendy Keener. And then we have various members from contractors here from Bristol Environmental Solutions, my company Jacobs, and then also AECOM. Next slide, please. And so for RAB members, I'm not going to go through the whole list here, but these are our regular list of our RAB members. We have had no recent changes to that, so so that list stands. I don't know if I've seen Mr. Lawson join yet. Okay, so go ahead to the next slide, please. So for our agenda tonight, we've just done the welcome and WebEx logistics and introductions. We'll move on to a co-chair welcome from Colonel Cook and Mr. Lawson if he is here. And then we'll go through some RAB business. We have a little bit more than usual for RAB business, and that's because we had a couple events, the TAP meeting and a RAB member tour. And then we also have elections every October. So we'll just run through the elections. That will be very short. And news of note and other business. Anyone has anything to say? Our standard, our standard presentation topics is Bill Meyer will go through the timeline review and administrative record update, and then discuss the PFAS and PFOA remedial investigation with support there on that presentation from AECOM. And then Doug Close from Bristol will do the update on the interim stormwater treatment system. At that point, again, at the end of each one of those presentations, there's an opportunity for RAB member questions. Then we'll have RAB open discussion, and then we'll move to public questions and adjourn by 8 o'clock. Next slide, please. So I've already kind of touched on this, but during the RAB open discussion, when RAB members ask questions, again, please raise your hand by scrolling over your name to raise your hand. Then I will call on you and you can unmute yourself to ask your question. We ask people to kind of keep it to a 3-minute limit. I'm not timing you, but I just want to make sure that everyone who has questions has an opportunity to speak. And again, public questions should be submitted through the question and answer panel and submitted to all co-hosts. I do want to say that one of my colleagues, Lisa David, is here. Lisa is bilingual. So should any questions be typed in Spanish, she will be able to read those out to us in English. Next slide. Okay, so Colonel Cook, I'll turn it over to you for co-chair welcome.
Awesome, thank you, Amy, and again, welcome to our quarterly RAB meeting. We have several updates for you. We've made some significant progress since the last meeting, so in an interest of getting to those as quickly as possible and making sure we have enough time for questions, we're gonna continue to roll right on. I do not see Mr. Lawson online, but Chuck Thomas, if you're so inclined, if you'd like to jump in and represent, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll press on.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're on.
Put you on the spot there.
Oh, good. Thank you. Welcome. I don't know where Mr. Lawson is, but it's my pleasure to welcome everyone as well. And maybe it's a good time for me to take a minute to just thank the Air National Guard for arranging the recent tour for RAB members at the base. I found it very enlightening, as always. It's incredible the scope of work that's being done there is incredible. And I wish that we could find a way to show it to more people. It really helps you to see what's going on firsthand and get a grasp on what the true scope of the project is and the advances that we've made. Later on, I'll probably comment on some of the materials that we've got, including the swap outs of the different filtering mediums and things like that. But it's just really says a great deal about the cooperation that we're having from the Guard. Thank Colonel Cook for arranging that. and we'll look forward to working together more in the future. And with that said, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Chuck. We will have more tours. We can do that pretty much anytime, but certainly it helps to do that during the media swap out so our participants can see that in action. It's also not a great place to visit over the winter because as Mr. Lawson found out last January, February, it's pretty brutal down there. But we'll do what we can to make sure that is available to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to some RAB business. Go ahead. So just again, touching base on this platform change to WebEx. When these virtual meetings started back at the beginning of the pandemic, multiple platforms were tested by the Stewart RAB planning team. DoD Computer Systems, that's Department of Defense, sorry. Department of Defense Computer Systems limited some platforms due to security issues. That is still somewhat of a concern. And at that time, GoToWebinar offered the best solution. It should not be any surprise that all of the virtual meeting platform companies have been rapidly evolving and upgrading over the past couple of years. And each one of them has upgraded their security and changed a lot of the things that they offer. And basically this summer, this is not a new topic, but in the summer in particular, we got into a discussion with some RAB members who recommended that we try a virtual platform that offers closed captioning in Spanish. So we are trying that now with WebEx. Again, I know that it is machine-based live transcription, so it may not be very good. And I apologize for that. And again, if you know of a platform that does a better job, I would, and I know that the whole team would be very interested in knowing one. I am hoping that moving forward, if we're able to go this way, that a bilingual RAB member might make him or herself available to translate any written questions that come in that are submitted in Spanish in the question and answer panel. Again, as I mentioned, I have one of my colleagues doing that today. What we would do is we would make you a co-host of the meeting, as we also do for Mr. Lawson when he is here. Being a co-host enables you to see the questions that come in, and then you would see if there are any written in Spanish. So I know we were hoping to get somebody to do that this time, and it probably was very unclear what the ask even was. So again, my colleague is here to do that should we get any written questions in Spanish. The only verbal questions that we take during the meeting are from RAB members, and those we take in English. But should a bilingual RAB member be willing to serve that role going forward, please let me know. Next slide, please. Okay, so in August, we had an internal training meeting for RAB members on the Technical Assistance for Public Participation grant program. That's called TAP. We had a presentation to the whole at a regular RAB meeting that gave an overview of it a year ago. I think it was last October. But then we had a more in-depth meeting that got into the specifics in August. What the TAP grant program does is it provides RABs with an opportunity to hire independent technical assistants that would contribute to people's understanding or their ability to provide advice to decision makers by improving their understanding of cleanup activities. So basically, you can hire a technical advisor to help you understand some of the technical aspects of the program. I know there are quite a few RAB members who have that, have some technical and environmental specialties and are able to do some of that, but the TAP grant, should you choose to pursue one, could help you hire an independent technical consultant to do that. The dollar limits there are listed. Again, it's a grant program that you apply for, the RAB members apply for. There's an annual limit of $25,000 or 1% of the cost to complete of the restoration program, with a lifetime limit of $100,000, but you can apply for a waiver. The Code of Federal Regulations that sets up the TAP grant process is linked there. Next slide, please. So the follow-up on the TAP meeting that we had in August, basically the next step is in the hands of the RAB members. It's up to RAB members to define and vote on a project to help better understand the environmental restoration program. And like I said, it's typically used to hire a consultant to help understand technical documents. There are quite a few activities that it cannot be used for, and we went over those in our August meeting. Includes community outreach, as well as other activities such as lobbying or generating new primary data. But we had quite a bit of discussion about community outreach, and I think there was maybe a little bit of frustration among the team that TAP funds can't be used that way, but that it's part of the law. Part of the TAP grant process is that the team must consider alternate resources for technical information. Can you get that support in other ways? And then the community co-chair or his designee prepares the application. The Department of Defense reviews that. Basically, they're reviewing it to make sure that it meets the requirements of the TAP program. And once approved, it's forwarded to base contracting, and they will solicit bids and award a contract. Should RAB members have a consultant in mind that they want to hire, they can put those names forward. We actually just went through this process with the RAB members at Barnes Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned also, there was a RAB member tour. I've got a couple slides with photos. If there's a RAB member Mr. Thomas or somebody else who was on that tour and would like to talk about it, you're welcome to take yourself off mute and present that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, Councilman Anthony Grice for the city of Newburgh. I went on the tour, very, very informative, because to actually see where for a rain event, to see how big that parking lot is, and then the tunnels that run down into really to see it gives you a better picture and a better understanding of what's going on. The facilities there were, to not get too technical, really doing the best that they could considering all of the circumstances. I would just, recommend that we continue looking at ways to improve what we're doing there. But it was very enlightening, and I really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. I don't know if there are any other RAB members who want to contribute to that. There's another slide with some more photos. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, we'll move on to RAB elections. So the RAB typically holds elections during the October meeting each year to fill any community member seats that will be vacated at the end of the year and to elect a community co-chair. Nobody has indicated that he or she is interested in stepping down from their RAB member seats. So we did not solicit for any new members for community RAB members. Next slide, please. And for the co-chair election, according to this RAB's operating procedures, we do elect the co-chair annually. However, that person is allowed to serve. There aren't any term limits. So 2 or more terms are fine if the RAB community members vote to have that person continue. Mr. Lawson has volunteered to serve another term. I'm concerned that he's not here tonight because I think he did plan to be here. So I have not heard from RAB members that anyone else was interested in stepping up to serve as co-chair, but this would be the time to say so. If any RAB community members want to serve as co-chair. Okay, then if RAB community members could raise their hands to vote for Mr. Lawson to continue? I may need to follow up by email because I'll have to look to see if we need a quorum or a majority, or it may just be majority of members who are on the call. Okay, all right, thank you very much. You can put your hands down. So I believe Mr. Lawson will be continuing as co-chair. I will just have to double check to make sure that we have the necessary numbers of people on the call to make that vote. If not, I'll follow up by email. Okay, next, Bill Fetter, is your hand still up from voting, or did you have a question? Okay, I'm going to move on. So our upcoming meetings, this team we schedule our meetings for the last Wednesday of each month quarterly, except for the January meeting, which is bumped to the very first week of February. So these are the dates for the meetings in 2023. Next slide. So just following up on a couple just news types of things for the RAB. Again, Technical Sergeant Dan Hodder is your new contact for public affairs at the base. His email is here. If you have RAB related questions, please send them to both me and to Dan. As Colonel Cook was just presenting, we just had a base tour in August, and the Guard will continue to host small RAB tours whenever possible. So I don't know if there's an interest to get another tour in before the weather turns worse in the winter. But I know that they'll certainly consider hosting that if there's interest. So just let us know. The operating procedures were updated and signed last year to reflect the change from a Restoration Advisory Committee to a Restoration Advisory Board. And so there are no further changes to the operating procedures at this time, and you should all have a copy of those. Again, we did the Technical Assistance for Public Participation training meeting in August. And then we've been asked before to provide the contact at the New York State Department of Transportation for the 17K project. Heather Pillsworth, her contact information is listed here. Next slide. Okay, so at this time, if RAB members, they can raise your hand if you have any questions related to the RAB business that we just conducted or any other RAB business coming up. Bill Fetter, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Good evening. I was wondering if Heather will be on the agenda to give an update on the 17K bypass, or will we need to contact her directly?
We have asked them to be on the agenda and have gotten some various answers that basically didn't sound like they were quite ready to. I think that your best bet would be to send her an email and make that request. I think it probably has a little more weight coming from the community members.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah. Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm scrolling through the participant list to look for hands raised. Oh, seeing none, we'll move on. Next slide, please.
I mean, I thought I saw Chuck Thomas had his hand raised.
Oh,
Maybe.
I don't see it now, but Chuck, if I missed it, please go ahead and take yourself off mute.
There we go. Oh,
Go ahead, we can hear you. Oh, now I can't. Chuck, try to unmute yourself again.
how about that?
There we go.
Okay, thanks. About the New York State DOT and the 17K bypass, I had a conversation with Heather Hillsworth, who had given me the name of Jonathan Bass to call, and she referred me to him, and he said that at that point they were waiting for an agreement with the city, and they were getting past the hydrology reports. But the next day, he gave me a good deal of information. But the next day, he said he heard from his superiors at DOT that Mike Ottinger was the contact person for the RAB and the DOT. So I was a little surprised, but I wanted to pass that along so we can make sure we're all talking to the right people.
Chuck, on behalf of Stewart, we are also a little surprised.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll reach out
I
to
was
DOT
kind of-
and we'll reach out to DOT and chat with them.
Yeah, it was kind of blunt.
It's their project, not ours.
Yep.
So
Yep, but they said that Mike would be the contact person.
Yeah, Chuck, and Jonathan Bass has moved on from DOT, so we're just still waiting to get another contact, but we can definitely get that for you and get you an update.
Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate it because that's a big deal. That's 20% of the water going into the system, being diverted out, and I think that's a major concern. And also where the water ends up once it's diverted is a very great interest to us. So thank you.
Yeah, we absolutely agree, and we're looking forward to getting that project moving along as quickly as possible. So
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate your filling us in on that. And it sounds like we will get you a new contact as soon as we can. Any other questions or comments from, Anthony Grice, your hand's raised?
Yeah, so because I just need clarification because that underpass, from my understanding, was not in the city limits. So I'm a little thrown off if they need city permission. So please, someone follow up with me, and I can see where that is. But where that location is not city limits.
Okay, we'll take that as an
it's
action
certainly
to
not
follow up.
city limits. It's in the town of Newburgh, so it may
Right.
have just been a poor choice of words. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Bill Fetter, did you have a comment on that?
Yes, just that the city will be the ultimate receiver of the water, so they need to know if their culverts and whatnot will be able to handle the flow, which is part of the hydrology, I'm sure, being studied. Thank you.
Thanks. Chuck Thomas, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, not necessarily, Bill. I'm happy to talk to you offline on it. The city is not necessarily going to be the recipient of that water, and we are encouraging that water is diverted back to Murphy's Ditch. And it was explained to me that they had to do hydrology studies and engineering studies on Murphy's Ditch to make sure it could handle the water and some things like that. But I'm happy to talk to anybody offline unless you want to keep going further tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Bill, your hand's raised. I don't know if that's still or again. All right, if not, his hand's down now. So we will move on. There's clearly interest in that, and hopefully we can get a presentation on that at some point soon. Next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Meyer for update on the environmental projects. Your turn, Bill.
All right, thank you. My camera's not working tonight, so I'll just be verbal. On next slide, we got the important links and information. See the link to the admin record. There's also a link to where we post the interim stormwater treatment system quarterly reports. And then there's also a Air Force Civil Engineer Center PFAS information link. Next slide, please. So with the AR, we're still waiting to get up the minutes from the July meeting. We got a backlog of information to get uploaded to the admin record. Our contractor that we had on board had some delays getting access and a government computer to actually do the uploads and that. But that should hopefully shortly change here, and you'll see a lot of information getting uploaded. So last year's final report, and I think everyone got a copy of this. We sent it out to everybody for the long-term monitoring for the landfill site 3. That should be uploaded along with the meeting minutes, and then you'll see these meeting minutes as well for the next meeting, hopefully. And that's it for that. If you could move to the next slide. Just kind of a quick overview of the CERCLA timeframes and where we're at with some of the sites. Obviously, the PFOS RI, where we started the field work. There's also a site 5 that was a pesticide site where we completed the RI, but our next phase, we have to do an FS. We're working with Justin Starr on that. And then site 3 is a former base landfill that's been on long-term monitoring and management. And every year we go out and do the sampling for that. And then just below those is typical number of years time frame that it takes to do, you know, in the CERCLA process. Years 1 through 3 is the PASI. RI is typically year 3 through 6. You can deduct the durations from these, you know, 2 to 3 years for PASI, 3 years for RIFS, and so on. Just is just a timeline to kind of give folks kind of an overview of the CERCLA process and how long things take. Next slide. This is the timeline for PFAS activities. I'm not going to read this to y'all. But on the bottom, 2022, we finalized the UFP QAP and we started the field work. So next time we meet, we'll have a 2023 bullet on there, and hopefully a phase of the RI and field investigation completed. Next slide, please. So on to the PFOA remedial investigation. Next slide. So as I stated earlier, we submitted the final UFP QAP. That's another document that you'll see on the, it actually just got finalized about, I think 2 weeks ago. But we have to parse it out because it's too large of a file. It'll be uploaded to the admin record in probably about 3 or 4 parts or more because of the size of the document. But the document will be posted to the admin record. Also, we had done some TPP, technical project planning and working meetings with the DEC. We held the first meeting on 9 August. And we actually have a letter back from DEC with their comments. We basically did a comment resolution, response to comments on the UFP QAP, and everyone was in agreement with our responses to those, and those will also be uploaded to the admin record as soon as we can get them uploaded. Next slide. So the RI status. So right now, the initial field work has started, and it's going to continue through December. AECOM, working with the Corps of Engineers and Mike Ottinger, we got all the sampling locations have been surveyed and cleared for subsurface utilities. Right now, Army Corps of Engineers out of the New York district is working on right of entries for off-base field work. So at locations where we're going to go off-base, they're trying to get right of entries so we can go in and collect the samples. And filming of the on-base storm sewer, and I'll hand this over right now to John Santacroce because he can give you probably more details about the closed circuit TV filming and the drilling and subsurface stuff. John, you want to hit those last 3 bullets?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We mobilized to the site to start the field work on September 19th. The first thing we did was survey all the locations mark them out on the ground. Then we had a service come in with ground penetrating radar to make sure all of our potential sampling locations were clear of utilities. So that took about 2 weeks. And drilling and soil sampling started on October 6th. To date, we've drilled 55 soil borings, collected about 110 soil samples. Yesterday, we started some of the temporary well RAB groundwater sampling that we're going to do. We have about 5 of those temporary wells installed at this point. And as far as the closed circuit TV footage goes, we were able to do about 15,000 linear feet of pipe where we took video footage that now we have to go back and view to see if we could find any, part decay or issues with the stormwater piping to investigate in the future. So that's about where we are. We're on schedule, and we still plan to be done with the this first mobilization of sampling sometime in December, toward the end of the year. Like Bill said, there will be letters coming around to some of the public where we want to access surface water or sediment locations that require us to pass through their property. So those letters are coming around and should be out there. I guess next slide. These are just a few photos of our field work. You can see the geoprobe drilling machine there on the left. That's what we use to do our shallow soil borings, soil sampling. Up there on the left side, you can see our crew that's out there working on the storm sewer work. That's kind of the camera operator up on the upper right side, and then inside the trailer where we can view the footage in real time as we're out in the field. Next slide. So this is our schedule, kind of unchanged from what you've seen in the past. So field mobilization 1 will go through this fall into early winter, ending at toward the end of this year. We'll analyze the sample results. Take anywhere from 15 to 20 days from when they're received by the lab to come back to us. Once we get all that data, we'll analyze it and plan on our next mobilization, which would be the spring summer 2023 next year. And once we get that data back, we'll do the same thing and see if we have to go out for additional mobilizations. So we're still targeting to have that remedial investigation draft report out in the fall of 2024. Next slide.
Okay,
And that's it.
John.
Yep.
So at this point, RAB members, if you have questions for Bill or John on the status of the remedial investigation work, this would be the time to raise your hand. Go ahead, Bill Fetter.
Yes, on the camera work, was there not a representative from the Air National Guard in the trailer while the camera work was being done, viewing it in real time?
So,
Hey, Bill.
I don't
Hey,
think. Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Yeah, we were outside there. We were looking inside, what was going on. We made a bunch of notes. There was also an AECOM representative as well. So we took a few notes of some issues that we might have seen in the pipes, and but we'll get a better idea once the full report comes. But we do have some sections that are areas of concern or things that we might have to, further investigate, but it's just good to see what we have initially.
Would it have been worthwhile to do that work while you had the camera in the hole rather than remobilize for additional time and money.
This is Bill Meyer. They got it recorded, so they can go back and look at all the footage. Everything's recorded every
Right.
second down the hole.
But
But
if
doing it real time, would that save money? I don't
We-
know. You'd have to ask the base civil engineer that.
It was all done in real time, Bill.
what, and I realize that, but
Evaluating the conditions of the pipe and that, so someone could come up with an estimate. I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, and we were able to, if we saw a break and we wanted to go in a different direction, we were able to do that in real time and make those decisions in the field. But we're not ready yet to fully share that information. We got to go back and look at all the footage in our notes and put together a report. And at this point, we've pretty much covered all of the piping at the base between this mobilization and the previous mobilization. Or
what is the
a
cost?
large majority of it.
What's a typical mobilization cost?
This took us 25 days.
But the cost for just for mobilizing the equipment, how much is that?
The mobilization, $1,500 to
Okay,
mobilize
minimal,
the equipment and the
minimum.
crew.
All right.
Yeah, it's not expensive it's operating and days on site that costs the money, not the mobilization. It's a semi-local contractor,
Okay,
East and
Okay.
Westchester
Thank-
County. Yep.
thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Chuck Thomas?
Okay, thanks so much for taking the question. I want to go back to the RRSE, and if you could remind me quickly what RRSE stands for?
Sure, it's a relative risk site evaluation.
So that's it. Okay, that's the one I was looking for. Has that been updated, or does it need to be updated? Given that PFASs have now been assigned a different level of interest, and I don't think PFASs were covered at all in the original RRSE. I don't know if anybody can comment on that.
Yeah, so with the Air Force, DoD, Air Force, because they came up with some new comp with our regional screening levels and that they're relooking at the not so much the RRSC process, they're just kind of looking at those standards overall. I know for like the remedial investigation, we're using the regional screening levels that EPA came out with. With respect to the or updating the relative risk site evaluation, we're waiting for some direction from AFCAC and the secretariat level for the Air Force for I&E on how they're going to do that, because it basically impacts all of them that were done, right? So, but I don't think that they're going to run out and I think they're evaluating that and they're going to come up with some kind of direction for the folks in the field, being us, Air Guard, how they're going to go about that. But because it's so recent when they just changed these, there's a lot that are going on. It's like turning a battleship. It takes a lot of time for all the right people to, touch the things that they need to come up with that. We can keep you posted, as we hear stuff. But right now there's no direction from AFCAC or Air Force for us to go back out and redo it. But once the dust settles and we have an idea of what the policy is going to be and how we're going to handle and address all this, I see it as a possibility. I mean, they'll probably have to redo that. I mean, we're re-looking at our site investigation stuff to see if there's other sites that weren't eligible that are eligible now based upon those lower numbers as well. So there's lots of things going on right now with those proposed EPA changes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I just, wanted to make sure we were on top of that. And thank you for your response. I think it's important that we stay updated on what, if any, changes to the RRSE are going to happen. So thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Chuck. At this point, I do want to read two questions that have come in that are related to the topics we've just had. Rick Scheuer asked whether interim reports will be provided to the public between the phases of the RI, and if so, how would that be distributed?
This is Bill Meyer. I believe what we're doing is once AECom collects the data, and John, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. We're putting that. We're going to compile that data, and we'll have a technical project planning session with the regulators and the health department to kind of show them here's what the data showed, and here's where we think that we're going. Were we planning on doing a tech memo?
There may be a tech. There may be a tech memo, but we will do an update to the QAP that will discuss where we're going next, and that has justification for where we go next in it. So
Right.
that would be where it's documented.
Okay.
And Bill, would it be? It's safe to assume there will be presentations on preliminary results as we move forward with these RAB meetings.
Yeah, because by the time that we have our next RAB meeting in February, hopefully we'll have some drawings and some validated data that we can kind of just share the initial here's what we saw. You know, if we're far along. Yep.
Okay. Manna Joe, I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarity about a future tour. I had to miss the most recent tour, and I think I heard you say that there would be other tours, but that it wasn't so good to do it in the winter. So I was wondering if you had, excuse me, any idea when the next tour might be.
It's Colonel Cook. If there's interest, we could probably squeeze one in late November. But certainly the more into winter we get, the rougher the weather is. It was exceptionally cold last time. It's also a safety hazard because it gets quite icy down there. So we just want to avoid any kind of issues with the cold or the ice. If we can't get one in before winter, then we're probably looking at early April.
Well, I do want to express interest, and perhaps you could, send a request to see if others are interested for mid-November, if possible.
Yes, ma'am. We'll get with. I will get with Mr. Lawson tomorrow and ask him to canvass the rest of the RAB, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, but before we move on, I want to go ahead and address another question that was submitted in writing, and that has to do with the TAP process. Bill Friedman asked, what can you say about avoiding conflicts of interest in the TAP process? Bill Meyer, is that something you can address?
Yeah, I mean, conflicts of interest for the contractor or for the RAB, or both.
I'm going to say all of the above.
Say again?
Go ahead and address both, I would say.
Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, so conflict of interest, I mean, when a contractor gets hired to represent, like a restoration advisory board, and that a lot of times, sometimes some contractors don't like doing that because it prevents them from competing for other contracts on the project. But I mean, another conflict of interest would be, hiring your son, if you are a RAB member, recommending a family member, we're looking for, that's could be a conflict of interest, or here, hire my buddy because he knows. But that's why we go through the base contracting. They make sure that when we select someone in that, especially if there's a competition component to it, that they avoid those kind of conflicts of interest. So, I mean, it's not to say that, you know, a RAB member can recommend, you know, a company in that, because there's lots of folks that, I'll give you the case in point in Barnes when we did it. There was a university professor, and then there was another guy that was a retired university professor that was a consultant. And, you know, the RAB members felt that they would represent them, and they felt confident in the, but, you know, so there was not a conflict of interest there, because it was you know, it's not like it was someone's best friend. They'd been doing this, you know, for other communities across, you know, Massachusetts. So hopefully that answers that. I mean,
Okay, thanks, Bill. Bill Fetter, you just raised your hand?
Yes, is there a dollar amount below which you don't have to go out to competitive bid?
we can do like direct awards, but it depends on the what the scope is, and, you know, the level of effort in that. There's a process that we have to go through to do that. And then there's also dollar limits within, you know, the FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation that governs, you know, how we do government contracting.
Okay.
We can do that, but they have to set it up right. Sometimes it's a lot easier for us just to go direct to like a university to get somebody to, you know, like a professor or that, because we can go through like a cooperative agreement to access those folks to provide that assistance.
Okay.
Talking to the base contracting folks in Massachusetts, you know, I mean, that was kind of what we talked about with them. It's a lot easier for them to go direct to a university than it is, you know, to a private contractor. Or we can do both, but there's ways that you can work with that. You can access both of those folks on one
Thank you.
contract. So
Thanks.
okay.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So I'm going to move on to the next presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, turning it over to Doug Close from Bristol Environmental Solutions for an update on the interim stormwater treatment system.
Good evening, everyone. Doug Close with Bristol Environmental. We're going to be updating for the quarter July 1 through September 30th. Next slide, please. We'll present data and talk about the quarterly results. We treated for this period for the total treatment to date, July 2020 to September 30th of 22, we're at 337 million gallons of water treated. And this quarter was approximately 23 million gallons. The granular activated carbon and the resin was replaced in a media exchange in mid-July, July 14th through the 22nd. What we did was we utilized our original configuration of GAC, and resin in trains A, B, and D. And in train C, we took the opportunity to put all carbon media so we could do comparison. It's an all carbon train and our carbon resin trains. We'll get more into that later in the presentation. After the exchange of the media, we began monitoring for all the different variety of things, pressure, treatment, results, sampling, and start to compare the train C of all carbon versus our typical configuration of carbon resin. Next slide. So here's our sampling results for the quarterly period. I would like to remind you about the scale. If you're just seeing this chart for the first time, if you look on the left-hand side, this is our influent PFOS, PFO levels in the water as we draw it in from the pond. The scale is in triple numbers or hundreds of parts per trillion. And our average level of influent PFOS and PFOA is 329 for this quarter. And that's a pretty typical number year round. We've been in that target range for the last couple years. We did see a mid-August high of 500 plus parts per trillion, and we saw some lower ones. So the average remains right in those low 300 parts per trillion. And then on your right-hand side of the chart is your parts per trillion in single digit. And this is the combined effluent of water after treatment, after it's run through our treatment system and we've discharged that. This is the effluent we're sampling as it goes over. I think it's important to show on this chart also that the left-hand side, the beginning of July, we were running and operating at the tail end of the last media change. And right there where there's no bar on the 26th of July, that was the period where we're making the change out. And then this quarter continues to run from the end of July, and we're still currently operating under that media. And our average level for effluent detection of both PFOS and PFOA combined was 2.63 for this quarter. Next slide, please. Another feature that everybody's becoming real familiar with, especially after getting the opportunity to tour, and we've been showing this and talking about major weather and the rec pond water levels. This summer was exceptionally dry, in my opinion. I'm not from the area, but we felt that we were provided some good dry weather. The majority of our quarter was below the weir. We had storms from the beginning of the 4th of July weekend or right before, and then really nothing of much in July and August. And then after Labor Day, we started seeing some more occasional rainstorms with a big one over the holiday, and then just more frequency thereafter. But this quarter was successful in keeping the water behind the weir at right around 87% of the time. Next slide, please. Again, a reminder of the system, the configuration and how the water flow. The pump on the far left-hand side of the diagram brings the water into our first container where it goes through separation and coarse and fine sand filtration. That is sent over to another smaller trailer or conic structure where we have bag filtration as our second step in pre-filtration before it's distributed into 2 additional containers with our treatment vessels. Each vessel or each container has 6 vessels, and they're either configured with your GAC1, GAC2, and resin in polish. And then in this case, our train C, which was our testing for this period, we used GAC1, GAC2, and GAC3. And then we use that GAC3 in the same language or the same familiarization as our polishing unit as the resin. So that's what we set out to start our comparison on. Next slide, please. So the all GAC testing update, again, train C, we operated it after the media chain, and we started comparing our operational constraints and performance against the other 3 trains of GAC, GAC, and resin. Water quality, as you may suspect during the summer, is very difficult. This summer especially had a very high algae growth. The water quality issues that typically impact our GAC, GAC resin were not as sufficient or not as significant on our all GAC treatment. This is because we can regularly service all GAC. It means all 3 vessels can go through automated backwashing as many times during the week period as we need. and it can be regularly run and regularly monitored. So it's a major advantage of an all GAC system is the backwashing opportunity. Regular maintenance and the effort to do that decreases the overall building or the pressure building up in the third treatment unit. So having an all GAC polishing or third treatment unit, we're getting the opportunity to backwash all three medias throughout the media cycle, where we don't get that opportunity because of the nature of the resin. It's not suitable for backwashing. We've tried several different efforts, attempts. It's just too vulnerable. We could lose media if we were to improperly backwash, so it becomes a constraint. Later in the run cycle, beginning in September, with our contract update, we started performing weekly side-by-side system performance sampling. That is, we are sampling the individual train. Let's say train A has GAC and resin. We're sampling all those interprocess locations and effluent location, and we're also taking the C train and we're sampling all of those process locations to compare how the treatment goes between the three vessels, whether you're in a GAC resin versus an all GAC system. And we'll look at some of this, a little bit of the data points at the end of September here shortly. Next slide, please. So as a visual, I wanted to put this up with photos because the pressures that we've been talking about and the impact on the resin material is what you're seeing in the left-hand photo. Over time, our pre-filtration equipment doesn't catch everything. So the algae, the biogrowth, the sediments, the solids that get through our system, once it gets into a resin vessel, this is what it looks like if it goes unattended. And so without the ability to backwash that out at planned intervals, we're only left with manually going in and skimming that material off. And you just can't do that every day. You wouldn't have any operating time. So that's a limitation of that resin type material in the final vessel or the polish position, as compared to the right-hand side photo where you see train C that had all GAC. This is after a backwash. So we automatically hit the backwash, we process that. That moves the material that is deposited or remains behind in any of the vessels, and we put that back out into the pond. So the carbon has the ability to be backwashed, and oftentimes during the summer we're doing all the carbon, well, at least the primary twice a week and the secondary carbon once a week. So backwashing is a regular, almost daily activity for our carbon media. Next slide, please. Another thing that, and this one's kind of busy, but we've been talking about it a long time now. So I tried to display it in this graph, but over time, and again, the calendar is at the bottom of the graph, picking up from when we made the media change on 7/22 till the end of the month. This is showing the effects of the pressure buildup and the decreasing speeds or any type of influence from those pressures that build up over time during the media cycle. And what this is set out to do, I want you to look at the more stable all GAC is in red. That's your train C. So we run at 15 pounds per pressure, and that's very doable, very manageable throughout the whole process, throughout the whole run, and we can keep it there. unlike the other trains, A, B, and D in the different versions of blue or darker, you can see how those pressures affect peak, and then we're left with restricted flow, changing of the performance, and just restrictions that build up in those third vessels over time. And that's kind of a display of the different pressure effects. Next slide, please. So here is a snapshot of what we're looking at initially and seeing with our 3 different trains of GAC resin, which are trains B, D, A, and then our C train. So if you take a look at the center where it says post-GAC 1, those are our trains B, D, and A. And then compared next to it is train C with the all carbon. And then we move down to post-GAC 2, which is your second vessel in line. And you move down to the third vessel in line, which is either your post-resin or GAC 3. So this is towards the end of the month of September. I really want you to look at the post-resin 1 and GAC 3 number. Our all carbon treatment is getting no detect as it leaves post-resin location or that third vessel, which is unlike some of our other vessels that are showing some high breakthrough through that in train B specifically. Train B was monitored early with some underperforming numbers. On the 4th of October, we saw a post-resin at the post-resin detection of 36 parts per trillion, leaving that resin vessel. And that started to become troublesome. And we've continued to watch that through October. And we'll talk a little bit about what our actions were. But then I can mention that the effluent is listed there on the far right side. So the takeaway on this shot was for us to show you that the GAC in the third vessel is doing a great job of removing PFOA and PFOS as it runs through the system. Next slide, please. So part of our corrective action after seeing some of those numbers and some more in the month of October, we recommended that we take the B train offline. We felt like we were very close to the numbers coming out of that third vessel that would influence the effluent waters going over the weir after treatment. So we didn't feel like our treatment was up to par in that B train. We took it offline. We immediately began scheduling with our contractors for another media change. I've got an early morning meeting with them tomorrow. We're anxious to go ahead and make a media change right in early November. We were probably looking at after Thanksgiving originally, but with those numbers creeping up, we want to be proactive and go ahead and get clean media put in there. With what we're doing and seeing, we're working with our team. We're considering introducing a second all GAC train and have 2 trains of all GAC in all 3 vessels and compare that to 2 trains that would stay with our current configuration of GAC, and resin. And as we do that, and now that we are set up to do comparison samples, we can get side-by-side analysis of how those match up through the whole next media run, which would probably be the month of November through March of 2023. That would be our next anticipated change. So we'll continue to monitor media availability, what we'd like to do with the media, any other new regulatory changes that might be coming, and we're continuing to keep our eye on emerging treatment technologies. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Now we'll turn to questions from RAB members. You can go ahead and raise your hand. I just want to throw out there real quick. I know there's a lot in Doug's presentation, and for people who may have, we do discuss the interim stormwater treatment system at each RAB meeting, but for RAB members or the public, if anybody has questions that they feel free to ask them, even if it's as simple as what is an interim stormwater treatment system again? I know there's a lot in that presentation, but Doug is happy to answer any kind of question at any level. So Bill Fetter, I know you put up your hand just as we were starting this presentation, and I may have missed a question before we moved on to this.
Is my hand still raised?
It is.
I
It's been raised all through this, but
yeah, I'm confused by the slash through the hand as being up or down. I still don't
okay.
know.
All right, that's fine. I'm going to take it down.
But I do have questions.
Sorry, go ahead, Bill. Then.
I didn't get to on slide 36, which shows the flow versus the concentrations. I don't know if you can go back to that, but I didn't have time to really sit down and plot it out. But it looks like that and the one above, the other half of that page, it looks like concentrations decrease with increased flow. Is that a fair statement, Doug, or is that not right?
Well, I think it happens in both occasions. We've seen decreasing concentrations of our influence when we get high storm events. I mean,
Okay.
it's pretty safe to say it gets diluted with all of the rainwater, or the concentration is less. But we've also seen the same amount of average in our influent with a foot of water going over the weir.
Okay.
So it's hard to give it a yes, no.
Okay. Thank you. Now, next to slide 40, which shows the pressure. Just to be clear, you're increasing that pressure to maintain a reasonable flow. Is that correct?
No, we are running into pressure from back pressure, from restrictions. So your media becomes impacted. It doesn't allow the water to flow through the media as freely as when it's cleaner. So as we see buildup in the vessels, we see buildup in the pressure.
So you're maintaining an even. How are you maintaining an even pressure then? Where are you maintaining an even pressure?
Well, we're getting that from the pump that's putting the water through the system.
Right. That's operating at the same rate continuously.
Yeah, we try to operate it at the upper limit. When pressure becomes a restriction or, a constraint, then we have to adjust the flow.
Okay.
So the more pressure, the lower that we can put water through the treatment. So we have to back it down, basically.
So these troughs then are where you back down the pressure and it quickly comes back in most cases.
Yes, sir.
Is that true? Okay, thank you. One last question on the PFAS analysis. Is the GAC, and I don't want to ask you to get into the particulars, but in the spectrum of compounds that you're looking at, is the GAC comparing across the entire spectrum comparable to the or better than the resin, specifically the low end?
Well, we can comfortably say yes to PFOS and PFOA. It's very comparable, if not better.
Right, but a large contention at the beginning of this by someone who had done their homework was the short chains. And I'm just curious if there's any indication of equilibrium across the spectrum. I don't think you're just testing two compounds. Is that true?
No, our method of analysis is registering 28 compounds. So the PFAS data is out there. We just haven't tabulated it. We don't have anything to compare it against until there's a standard for the other PFAS.
So all the compounds you're testing for have maintained similar removal in the total GAC versus the resin.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Anthony Grice?
Yeah, so Bill asked the two questions that I had, because when you look at the amount of water and then the PFAS level, so I was just curious about that because I would have thought that more, especially coming off of the parking area, the lot, that it would have been a higher level. So that was good. And then the other, as far as in the family of PFAS, especially short chain, what was being tested. So I just want to leave with an encouragement to please keep, because going out there, once you see it, you understand the dynamics even better. So I just want to encourage everyone to keep plugging away at it, of improving that system, because when it gets to a certain level, there's definitely, I don't want to say definitely, but there's a high probability that there's going to be some sediment, some gunk getting into the system. So just want to encourage you all to, keep plugging away of how to make it even better.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Chuck Thomas?
Thank you. The first question I had, I missed it and I apologize. Train D, what is the configuration of Train D?
Train D is one of our original configurations of GAC, and resin. So only
GAC and resin.
Yeah.
Okay, and Train A is GAC resin also, right?
Yes, sir.
So was there a difference between Train A and D?
No.
Oh, okay. That's probably why I missed it. Okay, I was looking for something going on there. And then going back to Bill's question about the short chain, I did not exactly understand your response. We are testing, and if I got it right, you are waiting for some guidance in terms of what numbers we should be testing for with the short chain versus long chain. I'm sorry if I didn't quite understand.
I think you've pretty much, paraphrased it correctly. We're waiting for actual regulatory guidance on all of the other PFAS compounds before we would start, comparing how much we're removing, because it's all just kind of a number at this point. We have the health advisory limit that we are scoped to do for PFOS and PFOA. And in the meantime, we're collecting the data and we have the PFAS data, we're not tabulating or reporting it.
Okay. And I get Intel and Teller's data, but so you are measuring it right now. And you
Yes.
can factor this into your equations at some point when you get some regulatory knowledge, regulatory
Yes, sir.
guidance.
Correct.
Thank you.
Doug, I want to read a question from, it's been submitted in writing that's also related to the short chain. Rick Scheuer says a more robust pre-treatment system would eliminate the algae growth and TSS, total suspended solids, getting to the vessels. GAC is less effective in removing short chain PFAS compounds, which are not included in a chart comparing only PFOA and PFOS. Can you speak on total PFAS effectiveness?
Well, I think I just tried to. I don't really have any, comparison that I can speak to. I don't have, the reduction. There's no other standard for me to base it against. We are continuing and are always looking at other pretreatment systems to deal with the algae. We are really focusing on, well, we're limited to non-chemical treatments. And we have some options that we're going to be employing next season that we're kind of excited about. And we're always constantly trying to look at the total suspended solids, which don't record high when we test for them. So, it continues to be an issue.
Okay. And I'm going to read another related comment from Rick, and then Bill Feder, I do see your hand raised. Also from Rick Scheuer, because it's related to that, what you're just saying, Doug. Have you considered foam fractionization as an alternative approach, as this PFAS removal technology is not affected by suspended solids and algae growth?
We have not looked at that. We are trying to make the best of the interim system until, the remedial investigation is further down the road and more focus on the mitigation becomes clear. So our scope is to try to make the system that we have, the interim system, perform in its best performance possible. So we haven't considered scrapping the system for something new, but we're still looking for alternate approaches that we can include with our current interim stormwater treatment system. I would say I'm looking at an ultrasonic technology that we can deploy out into the water that is supposed to attack the biofilm and reduce the ability for the algae to bloom and grow and be as active as it is in that pond. And that's one of the technologies that we're kind of excited about trying out next summer.
Thanks, Doug. Any other questions from RAB members before we move on? Okay, go on. So this is just the RAB open discussion part of the meeting. It's an opportunity for RAB members to review any other remediation questions or concerns, and to propose topics or action items for the February 2023 meeting. So RAB members, again, for anybody who joined late, to raise your hand. If you're on the computer, scroll over your name and the hand will appear, and click on that. If you're on the phone, press *3 to raise your hand. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I appreciate what was spoken to about short chain prior, and I understand, if I'm understanding correctly, you are documenting, recording those levels, and I understand awaiting for regulations to kind of be put in place. But I mean, if we look at this in terms of PFAS as a class, it would be really great to consider being proactive and trying to eliminate these prior to policy coming into play. I guess it's more a statement than a question.
Good statement. I mean, we're looking at it. The data will be available in the quarterly report because it's part of our analytical report. So it's out there for others to see, and it has been. So we're anxious to see, with more testing of all GAC and over a longer period of time, if it can be as comparable as a resin. We've never debated whether the resin was not the right choice for short chain, but what we're dealing with is the ability to make the system work at its highest, level for the longest amount of time that we can and still do the treatment that gets us, up to the regulations or the levels we want to be at. But thanks for your statement.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from RAB members? Go ahead, Chuck Thomas.
You. Thank you.
There we go.
So I just want to go back, and I meant to in my opening remarks, it took me by surprise, to thank you for investigating additional applications for Cisco for this web meetings that do incorporate the opportunity to have Spanish translation in our community of 46% of the city's population, probably Spanish. It's very important, and I really want to thank you for taking our question into advice, and looking at that and coming up with this Cisco web meeting. Like anything, it's Google basically translation, and I'd like to hear some comments, which I might hear afterwards, of people how they felt about it. But I really want to applaud you for taking that step. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chuck. Jennifer, do you have another comment?
I was actually going to address that. I've been viewing the captions and I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I would say that, and again, I do appreciate as well that this is a big task and that you're undertaking it and trying to go outside your comfort zone and find another system that would help our community. I am finding that the captioning is not actually accurate, and in some respects, depending on pronunciations and such, it's very difficult to follow. So we may have to explore that more, but I again thank you for taking up the challenge.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate that comment. We are aware that the live computer-based translation leaves a bit to be desired. And again, if RAB members are familiar with any platforms that offer this and do a better job than WebEx, please let me know. We'd be very interested to know that.
And to piggyback on that, we had the discussion at the tour about utilizing possible ANG members to who might be certified or whatever, like, designation as a translator to help with this issue. If we could still explore that, that would be great. It was discussed during the on-site tour.
It was Colonel Cook. We did discuss that during the tour. We do not have anyone on base that we believe would fit the need, but we'll continue to see if the greater organizations, NGB and the Air Force, have something available.
Okay, great. Thanks, Colonel Cook. Thanks for that comment, Jennifer. Moving on to the next slide. I think this is public questions. So again, I have been actually going a little bit out of our structure and reading out some of the public questions that have been submitted through the question module, simply because they really piggybacked on the discussion that was already going on. So I don't at this time see any other additional comments in the written questions and answers. So I'm going to move on. So if there are any further questions on these presentations from RAB members or the public, if you think of questions after you go home, or you realize you didn't quite understand something and you think of something else, what we do is Victoria Lung has made herself volunteered to be the recipient of those questions, and that's open for about a week and a half after these meetings. You can submit a question to her until November 11th, and we will address that question in the meeting transcript package. So you won't get a private reply, but when we put out the meeting transcript package on the admin record, it will be in there. So we haven't received any, I think in about a year, that are submitted after the fact. But I just want to make sure that people are aware of that opportunity. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'll turn things over to closing for Colonel Cook. And I did see that Mr. Lawson was able to join us partway through tonight's meeting. So hopefully Mr. Lawson can also chime in on the closing.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you for everyone's participation tonight and all of the awesome questions. Mr. Lawson and I have been attempting to coordinate a tour date. We just looking at late November, but we need to make sure that we can fit it in before it gets dark. In addition to the cold and the ice, we want to make sure that there's plenty of daylight so no one's in an unsafe situation. So more to follow on that probably in the next day or two. And again, thank you for everyone for your participation and your insights and your requests. We're certainly all in this together, and we appreciate all of your time and efforts. Again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our next meeting will be on February 1st, 2023. And we will be following up if there is a proposed date.
Is it okay if I share?
Oh, please do. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
Oh, again, I apologize. The technology and the weather monster tackled me, so I did join partway through. I know Chuck was able to step in, and I appreciate that. And I also too want to echo some of the thank yous that were already shared around the Spanish-speaking extension. I also want to reiterate what Colonel Cook just shared about extending the tour to about 12-ish or so individuals from the community beyond the RAB members. I think that would be a really, I'm thanking you in advance for that opportunity. And I also want to go back and thank you for the TAP conversation that we had. I thought that was very helpful as well. So I just wanted to say that I think we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate the energy and effort to extend deeper into the community. And to that end, I would like maybe for us to have conversations around getting back to the community. My understanding is that at a federal level, the state of emergency may be lifting in January. And if that's the case, I really would like for us to consider going back to the community and having these meetings in the community, and we can obviously discuss that over the next couple of months, but I wanted to raise that as something that we could aspire to. I did want to close out one other thing that if we can't find anybody in the Greater Snag environment to do the translations, I'm wondering if we can't identify someone at a university, because we've had some volunteers step up and want to provide translation services for the community. If that's something that we could do, I would like to offer that as an option as well. And I know that there may be some restrictions or guidelines, but I'm just suggesting it as an option. And again, look forward to the upcoming tour and continued engagement and deeper community involvement in the months and years to come in this work. So thank you all for joining, and I apologize again for my tardiness. And look forward to the next couple of conversations.
Thanks, Mr. Lawson. And I just want to let you know that Dan Hodder put a link into the question and answer panel with to view and download pictures from the tour. Not everyone is able to see that panel, but I will email that out to RAB members and participants from the meeting. So I will follow up with an email to you that has that link if you want to see pictures from the tour. Next slide. All right, that's what I thought. So, so with that, this meeting is adjourned. I appreciate everybody's time and your thoughtful questions and your input. And I will be following up with you again with that link and let you know when we have posted this meeting to YouTube. So thank you very much, and everyone have a safe night, and we'll talk again on February 1st, 2023. So please be safe and enjoy your holidays. Good night.